What's up, guys? Welcome back to Read and React. My name is Logan Campbell, and today we are going to be going over my wide receiver tiers and rankings for the 2026 NFL season. Now, just to reiterate what tiers are and how we use them, basically tiers are groupings of players based on their range of outcomes. So this may mean that the players within a tier, are pretty close in terms of how you feel about them or how they project, and it's really just to show where the larger gaps are in production. For example, you may not feel like wide receiver 4 and 5 have that much of a gap. Maybe it's kind of a coin flip between the two, but then wide receiver 5 and 6 you may feel completely different about okay, I think this guy has a much higher ceiling than this guy, and so that's what you kind of are using those tier breaks for. Really what this helps you do is kind of find the best value at each position depending on the round of your draft. So just for example, let's say, you're in the third round of your draft and there are 5 tier 3 running backs left, but only 1 tier 3 wide receiver, or actually just for the sake of argument, a tier 2 wide receiver. So you may look at the running backs and say, I have my running back, whatever it may be at that third tier, running back 15 available and my wide receiver 15. But if that wide receiver 15 is in tier 2, you would want to take that tier 2 wide receiver since they are the last of that grouping versus the running backs where, there may be a couple left that you can then get in your next pick. So tiers really are just to make sure that you're getting the maximum value because, if you took one of those tier 3 running backs, there might be another one available by the time you come back around, but that tier 2 wide receiver is probably gone, and then you're stuck with a tier 3 wide receiver who you probably feel worse about comparatively. So that's kind of what they're used for. For example, with running backs, Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs are in the same tier, and those guys are kind of coin flip, pick which one you want. But then from there, I think the next guy I have was James Cook or Christian McCaffrey. The next guy there is kind of a next step down in terms of either production or risk or, whatever it may be. A lot of times it helps to kind of divide them based on what you view their outcomes for. So with running backs, I had, Bijan and Jahmyr as solid RB1 candidates, RB1 overall, and then the next group was guys who you kind of have that top 3 upside, so on and so forth. So getting right into the wide receivers, we're going to start off with tier 1. Now, this is a software that I built. It's really just made for organizing players. You can adjust them up and down for your rankings and then add tiers as well. Don't pay attention to these overall rankings. On the left, I'm still fine-tuning these. I will be doing a full rankings show next week. These positional rankings, though, are pretty much set. It's more so just a matter of where I want to put these guys relative to the other positions, but we will get into that next week. So starting at tier 1, we have Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, to me, these are the receivers that if they finish outside the top 3 at the position, you're probably not thrilled. And if they're outside the top 5, it was truly a bad season. And for good reason. All of these guys have proven to be top 3 to 5 producers when they are healthy. I think barring an injury, something would have to go seriously wrong for these guys to finish outside the top 5. 3 of these dudes are on probably honestly the 3 best offenses in the NFL. I think, maybe the Cowboys are the third A or, second A or whatever, but the Bengals, Rams, and Lions really are 3 of probably the 4 or 5 best offenses in the NFL. JSN is kind of the one exception, but he just gets so much volume and is so efficient that he does deserve to be up here, especially after finishing wide receiver 1 last year. I will say he is probably the most risky in this range purely because last year was his one breakout season. The rest of these guys have proven they can produce at that high-end clip, multiple years. And all of these guys, I think, have a case to finish wide receiver 1. I think that is, you're not shocked if that happens. Moving on to tier 2, these are the guys who you can very much see finishing top 3 and even possibly wide receiver 1 for some of them, but just contain a little more risk. Justin Jefferson proved that he doesn't, he's not immune to the bad quarterback play. CeeDee Lamb is kind of, in that timeshare with George Pickens. They both can produce, but, his ceiling is a little bit limited because of that. A.J. Brown switched teams, which we do believe will be a very solid move, but, you just never know. And with his age, it is possible that there's some injury risk there. Drake London, it's really just the bad quarterback play and injury risk. Honestly, same story for Nico Collins. I think these two are honestly kind of the same player. Nico maybe technically has less competition from a Bijan, but overall they operate in very similar situations. And then Chris Olave just hasn't really shown a super elite ceiling yet. He's shown that he has a very solid floor and can produce, but to me he just hasn't shown that he kind of belongs in that upper echelon with even the Justin Jeffersons and the CeeDee Lambs on a normal year. So these are the guys that you're really okay with getting at your wide receiver one. This is wide receiver 5 through 10, and a lot of these guys are going in like the middle to late third round. And so this is where tier-based drafting is very helpful. Let's say in the first round, you're picking at kind of the middle stage, and you're able to get one of these wide receivers, and then it comes back around, and let's say you have CeeDee Lamb to Olave available, or you have like two of your tier 2 running backs left. Let's say, for sake of argument, Omarion Hampton and Ashton Genty are both available. Well, if you have only 10 picks, you can bet that realistically one of these guys will probably get back to you. And the difference between Chris Olave and like CeeDee Lamb or AJ Brown isn't as big as the difference between Omarion Hampton and one of your tier 3 running backs, for example, let's say Breece Hall. So that's where the tier-based drafting really comes into play, is you want to think, how can I get the maximum positional value, not just in terms of their overall positional rank, but in terms of what you're actually looking for. Like, grouping the players really shows you, okay, I feel pretty equal about these 6 guys. Obviously, the rankings reflect the minutias in kind of your feelings about them. But overall, you really want to kind of look for the maximum efficiency within a tier and kind of maximize where you're getting a guy for that tier. Because, like I said, if you took Omarion Hampton and then were able to get, let's say, Chris Olave the next round, now you've got a tier 1 wide receiver, a tier 2 running back, and a tier 2 wide receiver, versus if you didn't take Hampton and took CeeDee Lamb and then took a tier 3 running back, again, let's say Breece Hall, you now have a tier 1 receiver, a tier 2 receiver, and a tier 3 running back, which just overall is not the best positional value. You want to really try to maximize that and just maximize where you're getting your production from. The last 2 tiers were the guys that I think you feel pretty good with as your wide receiver 1. I mean, maybe towards the end of tier 2, you're feeling a little bit shaky, but overall, you're really happy with getting one of those guys as your starting receiver. And I think starting at this point in the draft is where you would like to get your wide receiver 2 ideally. I think if any of these guys are your wide receiver 1, you better have gotten either a really solid tight end, really solid quarterback, or just absolutely hammered the running back position, because a lot of these guys carry a lot more risk and not as much upside. I think all of these guys are, if they finish in the top 8, you're really happy. If they finish in the top 15, that's kind of what you're hoping for. So in this tier, we have Malik Neighbors, Devontae Smith, George Pickens, Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers, Garrett Wilson, Ladd McConkey, Tetairoa McMillan, Jalen Waddle, and Emeka Egbuka. So wide receiver 11 through 20. So a pretty big tier. Again, this is kind of the wide receiver 2 tier. I think you look at all of these guys and you can all make the case for how they finish top 10. Malik Neighbors, if his injury isn't affecting him as much. Devontae Smith, if he's the true alpha in the Eagles offense. George Pickens, he just finished top 10 last year with CeeDee Lamb, so it's definitely in his range of outcomes. Rashee Rice, can he stay on the field and not commit any more felonies this season? Zay Flowers, again, finished top 10 last year. Garrett Wilson, if he can just stay healthy and continue to get volume. Ladd McConkey, again, we saw it 2 years ago. Now they have an improved offense. Tetairoa McMillan, can he take that next step in his progression? And then Waddle, moving over to a new offense with a very solid quarterback in Bo Nix. And Emeka Egbuka, can he really just replicate what he did at the beginning of last year? So, I just made the case for all of these guys, but there is also very large downside cases for all of them. Malik Neighbors, if he wasn't injured, probably would have been in tier 1 or at the very least the top of tier 2. But again, that injury, you don't know when he's really going to come back. Another guy like Zay Flowers was last year his peak. He isn't a big red zone touchdown guy, and he isn't, super consistent in getting you high quality production. So what's his realistic ceiling? Tetairoa McMillan, can we really bank on the Panthers offense taking a step forward as well? Like, there's just a lot of risk here, and so that's why I think you don't want them as your wide receiver 1. But if you get them as your wide receiver 2, that's realistically what you're hoping for. And I think the ideal strategy is to get 2 of these guys and have one of them be your flex, because then you're going to have a very high-end flex relative to the rest of your league. If you got Devontae Smith at your wide receiver 2 and like Emeka Egbuka at your flex position, I think that's a really, really solid core, especially if you pair them with, one of these other receivers up here, even like an Amon-Ra or even like an AJ Brown. I think if you can really pair them with like a safer option, then you're set up really well. And again, all of these guys still have top 10 upside. It's just obviously they all can't break into that. And so to me, the ones that if I had to bet on breaking into the top 10, it's really hard to say. I think Malik Neighbors makes the most sense. Again, it really just depends on the injury. I would say Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, and Ladd McConkey are probably my 3 favorites, mostly because you're projecting growth for them. These are guys that have produced at solid levels in the past, couple years, but you're projecting that new role for them. And their offenses are good. I mean, the Chargers, Ravens, and Eagles all should be pretty solid. Whereas, the Jets, okay, it's the Jets. Like, Garrett Wilson could legit see 150 targets and catch 60 balls because that's how bad their offense is. Like, Jalen Waddle going over to a new team, okay, is he even the dominant one? Like, there is a lot of questions with a lot of these guys, but overall, I really like targeting them as your wide receiver 2. I think if you get any of these guys as your wide receiver 2, you feel really good, and if you get any of them as your flex, you're set up really, really well to then start building some depth either at running back or even at the wide receiver position with the next year we're going to get into. Looking at tier 4, these are the guys that you're, again, kind of similar to the last round or the last tier. If you have one of those guys as your wide receiver 1, you're probably feeling shaky. These are the guys that if you have them as your wide receiver 2, you're probably feeling a little shaky, but they make very good flex plays. So we have T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Jamison Williams, Luther Burden, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Christian Watson, Parker Washington, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, and Carnell Tate. And with these guys, I think if a lot of them have the case to break into wide receiver 2 production, and a lot of them have, but I also think that they are kind of so far down the draft board that a lot of them aren't going to have a lot of differentiation. Like, some of these guys might finish, wide receiver 18 compared to another at wide receiver 22, but there might only be 1 point per game that separates them. And that's kind of what you see as you get later into the wide receivers, is that the production really starts to clump together in terms of what you're getting. And so that's why these guys, I think you're kind of not targeting as heavily as a wide receiver 2. I think that some of them have wide receiver 2 potential. I think primarily T. Higgins, McLaurin, and JMO are kind of the 3 that if you need a wide receiver 2, I would target because they've all kind of produced before. Again, kind of on solid offenses. Terry McLaurin is the semi-exception. From what I've heard, the Commanders' offensive line has been really bad, but he should get a decent amount of volume and just be a kind of a solid floor play at wide receiver 2. But down the line, a lot of these guys are more flex plays, again, just due to the risk. Most of these guys have not produced at a high-quality fantasy level for an entire season, or they're at a stage where there's just a lot more risk due to age. I'm looking at you, Devontae and Mike. I mean, both of them are over 30. I believe they're the 2 oldest players in like this top 50 to 100 range. I just think like these guys are ones that you're, really worried about falling apart, turning into glass. I mean, Devontae, I think, feels a little bit better just because he did produce last year with Matthew Stafford, but Mike Evans is already dealing with injury, and so to me, he's a guy that you're really concerned about. And then Carnell Tate is kind of the first rookie receiver I believe we've seen. I think that he belongs in this tier over the next year because I think with the draft capital spent on him, the situation in Tennessee, I think he could be a very solid flex play, especially once he gets his feet under him. I'm not worried about the fact that he has no catches on 5 targets. I do believe the Titans offense is going to get better once we're in the season. But like I said, these are all the guys that you're hopefully getting at your flex. If not, I think getting one of these as the first guy on the bench is great. I think if you can get like a Carnell Tate as a high upside rookie on your bench, that's an amazing play, especially if you already have 3 running backs and, if you're kind of in a state where you're just trying to build some of that depth. I think a lot of these guys are risky, but have proven at some point in their career that they can produce. Like Christian Watson, Parker Washington, and Rome Odunze all have produced solid fantasy games, just not solid fantasy seasons. And I think that's kind of the main distinction here. Jamison Williams and Terry and even T. Higgins have produced decent wide receiver seasons, but with T. Higgins and Jamison Williams, they're each wide receiver 2s on their own team, so there is kind of a limited upside there. And with Terry, it is just the concern about the O-line for me that puts him down here. But again, if you get any of these guys at your flex, I think you feel pretty good. But ideally, if you're getting him as your first guy on your bench, you're opening yourself up to a lot of upside with very little risk, which is a great thing to have at this point in your draft. Moving on to tier 5, this is where you really are just looking for these guys on the bench. I think if you're getting one of these guys in your flex, I would be worried, unless you have a running back in your flex, obviously. Like if you're getting these guys as a wide receiver 3, I would hope you have a running back in your flex. But most of these guys you're not feeling good about starting at your flex in the beginning of the season. I think a lot of them have potential to jump into the flex range, but that's kind of what we're looking at here. Some of these lottery ticket late round guys that you're hoping can maybe turn out and give you some flex production when you need it, or if you have like an injury or a bye week, that's kind of where they shine. So we have Marvin Harrison Jr., Chris Godwin, Cortland Sutton, Quentin Johnston, Brian Thomas Jr., Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman Jr., DK Metcalf, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, and Michael Wilson. So honestly, there is a big range of kind of the quality of player and even offense that you're getting here. I mean, you have guys like Brian Thomas Jr., who was just a top 10 wide receiver 2 years ago, but last year completely flopped. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., who we're still waiting on the breakout from. You have Chris Godwin, who has shown that he can be elite, but with the injuries and just his age, how much can he really give you this year, especially with Emeka Egbuka more than likely taking more work. Jordan Tyson, hurt to start the year. Realistically, I don't know why I have Mekhi Lemon under him. I got to move him up. I mean, Jordan Tyson is out for 2 months. There's no reason he should be above Mekhi Lemon. You could even make the case for moving him down a tier, which I might consider, but for now we're going to keep him here. And like DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman are on a Pittsburgh Steelers offense that I think nobody is excited about. I mean, I know people are worried about like the Browns and Jets offenses, but that's because they have really, really good players that might not get, a full like range of work due to the quality of their offense. The Steelers offense, we're just like, it's there. They have an offense because you have to play offense in the NFL, but like, to me, there's like not like, it's weird how much we talk about, how concerned we are with some NFL offenses, but with the Steelers offense, they have nobody of note that we are even excited for from like a talent perspective, that we're just like, yeah, they exist. I do think like, a Michael Pittman Jr. is an intriguing pick for your bench because again, he could get some of that short yardage work. Alec Pierce will probably start moving up here now that he is officially off the pup, but still going to monitor, his state of practice. How much is he practicing? Is he going to be ready for week 1? And they just signed Keenan Allen. But overall, I think a lot of these guys do have high upside. I think you can make the case for any of them breaking into the flex production, but we have also seen the insane downside that most of them have. I don't think any of these guys have produced at a consistent level like multiple times in their career. And even worse, I think the difference here is that most of these guys are ones that we are not trending upwards. I think Tier 4, a lot of these guys are ones that are in the same boat where they kind of didn't produce super well for like an entire year, but we are projecting them to do better and grow and build on the production. Whereas guys here, we just don't have a ton of hope for. I mean, Chris Godwin Jr. is not going to immediately now have a breakout season. Cortland Sutton, probably the same thing. And both of these guys, I think, can be very solid floor plays if you need, but they're not guys that you're looking at as a potential breakout compared to like a Parker Washington or even like a Devontae Adams or a Mike Evans. Like, I think these two guys are both old, but you have more concerns with them than you do with the guys in the tier above them. And overall, I think that there's just a lot of concern in this round as a whole. I think the few guys that I do really like to target, I do think Marvin Harrison Jr. still has a case as a breakout. I think Quentin Johnston has a very good chance at kind of, having a higher end season. He showed that he can produce last year, and now we do project the offense to get better. Alec Pierce, it's mainly the health. I think he could potentially honestly jump up into this tier by the end of the preseason if he is healthy. Again, it's mainly just the health, but like the rest of these guys, you're really not getting a guy that you're going to think, wow, I think, he can really get me some solid production. I have a lot of hope in this offense. Most of these guys are on mid to bad offenses, or in the case of Lemon and Tyson, it's rookies who, can typically take a while to get going, and neither is the alpha in their offense. So overall, just a lot of concern in this range, and odds are you're probably going to end up taking one of these guys. But I think compared to the running backs, depending on the ADP of your draft and like where guys are going, I think this is the range where you kind of hope that you have 4 wide receivers and then really hammer the late round running backs, because I think a late round running back is going to provide a lot more value than some of these late round wide receivers. Coming into our last tier here, this is tier 6, and I don't really know what to call this tier. I would say this is just kind of the dart throws, the guys who really haven't shown super high quality production, but kind of you never know. So we have Jacoby Myers, Josh Downs, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Jalen Coker, Xavier Worthy, Romeo Dobbs, Wan'Dale Robinson, Rashid Shaheed, Jordan Addison, and KC Concepcion. And that is kind of where my tiers are going to end. We're down to wide receiver 53, so in most leagues, this is kind of the end of the receivers. Maybe if you're in like a 12-man league, you'll see a few more go, but overall, This is where most leagues will kind of finish it out. And with these guys, these are the guys that you're drafting in like the second to last round. And then if they don't get on the field in the first 2 weeks, you drop them. I mean, I think all of these guys, you can make the case for being the wide receiver 2 on their team and giving you solid production, or you can see them riding the bench and seeing 20% of snaps. I mean, I don't know that there's a single guy on here, maybe Jordan Addison, maybe like Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Doubs, and kind of Casey Concepcion, who you can truly say like, no, I feel confident that they'll be on the field. Actually, I'll throw Jalen Coker in there as well. He did just get the extension in the offseason and doesn't really seem to have much competition behind him. But most of these guys, you can see a very realistic world where they are not even the wide receiver 2 and are so buried on the depth chart that they're unusable. But in this range, that's kind of the beauty of it, is you can draft one of these guys as a late round lottery ticket, and then if he doesn't pan out, drop him for someone else who did. Like, these are very low commitment guys who you're not going to sit on for very long. Like, if you take Romeo Doubs and through 3 weeks he has 2 targets a game and like 1 touchdown and, a handful of catches or something, like, you can just drop him. Like, if you have Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed has beaten him out and Matthew Golden seeing 20% of the snaps and very few routes, drop him and pick someone else up. Like, again, these are all the very low commitment guys that you're not going to necessarily wait around on to produce. Whereas even in this tier 5, I think these are guys that you would, for the most part, hold for a little bit longer. Like, I think if you have Marvin Harrison Jr., you're probably giving him at least a month or maybe 2 before you really consider dropping him, unless it's atrocious. I mean, same with like Michael Pittman Jr. I could see being a guy that just rots on your bench all year, because if he's seeing the most production of a Steelers receiver, it's going to be really hard to drop him, but I could still see that not being meaningful. Obviously, Jordan Tyson with the injury, Mekhi Lemon just, being a rookie wide receiver 2 on a team. Like, they're like, a lot of these guys I think are a lot harder to drop, whereas into tier 6 here, you get to get some of the easier lottery tickets that, you just throw them aside if they don't work out. And if they do, even if these guys jump into more of this tier 5 range where, okay, they're giving you weekly like wide receiver 4 production, but then every few weeks, you get a flex week out of them and you can kind of play them during bye weeks, or, if you have an injury. I think that's where there is some value here. But again, these are mostly shots in the dark. I think, honestly, I almost prefer not taking guys in tier 5 and taking guys in tier 6. Again, mainly for the reason I mentioned, where these are much easier guys to drop if you're not getting production out of them. You're not going to feel committed to keep them or hope that they do pan out. You can, rotate them out and go get another guy off waivers who you feel much better about and can actually contribute to your squad. And that'll do it for my wide receiver tiers for the 2026 NFL season. Just to reiterate, in tier 1 and even tier 2, we have the very solid wide receiver 1 candidates. Tier 1 especially are the guys that you're looking to finish top 3. And in tier 2, you're looking for the guys that are finishing probably top 8 at the position. Tier 3, we get into the very solid wide receiver 2 candidates, the guys who could possibly jump into that, low end wide receiver 1 production, and even some flex candidates. This is the round where if you can get a guy in here as your flex, you're looking really good. Tier 4, we have our pure flex candidates, whereas the previous round you could get a wide receiver 2. These are the guys that you're really hoping for as a flex or the first guy on your bench to start to build some depth. Tier 5, we have the, I would say, most dangerous tier, where the guys that you're waiting for the breakout from but are still getting kind of mid-tier production. These are the guys that you're maybe getting as your first guy off the bench, maybe the second, but overall this is a pretty dangerous tier because these are the guys that are going to be really hard to drop but still have a very low chance of producing at a meaningful clip for you in the year. And then tier 6 is just the pure lottery tickets, the guys who, they're not doing anything through the first 2 or 3 weeks, you drop them and get someone who is. These are the guys that you're really just hoping can break into the wide receiver 4 or low end flex range and give you some production during your bye weeks or if you have an injury. And so with that, that'll bring the video to a close. Next time we're going to be going over quarterback and tight end tiers. Again, going to be lumping those into one video for the reasons I've done it before. There's just not a whole lot of depth, and so realistically there will probably only be 2 or honestly probably 3, maybe 4 tiers for each. So we'll go through those next time, and be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss those videos, and comment below what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong. If you even disagree with my interpretation of the tiers, if you think I should have more tiers, less tiers, have a tier every 3 players because you're a psychopath and that's how you like to operate, where the tiers are basically a ranking. Whatever you do, just remember the tiers are there for your sake and for your organization. These are just mine, as well as like kind of how it helps me visualize. If you're a guy guy who likes to have more tiers because you like to, have more visualization of the gaps, go for it. If you're a guy who likes to have less, that also works. But either way, comment below what you think I got right in terms of the players and what tier they belong in, and I'll catch you next time.